All right, welcome to our first set of notes on cancer. This is split into two different lectures, so we'll finish with the next lecture. So what exactly is cancer? Let's talk about it. Cancer actually includes more than 200 different diseases, and many of you are familiar with some of the cancers: breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, skin cancer. The question is, what ties all those diseases together? Why are they all considered the same disease? Cancer is identified by the presence of what are called malignant tumors, and we'll define that in just a moment. And these malignant tumors are capable of invading the surrounding tissues and then spreading to other parts of the body. And that's what makes cancer really unique from all other diseases. Okay, let's go ahead and define a few terms. What you're looking at here is a CAT scan of the brain. The brain on the left is a normal brain. The brain on the right has a neoplasm, a tumor. So what exactly is a tumor? We said that cancer is sort of characterized by tumors, unless it's a blood cancer. That's another issue. Tumor is a mass of useless cells. It's important that you understand these cells don't work properly, that are undergoing uncontrolled mitosis. That's why we learn about cancer in our cell division unit. These cells are copying themselves over and over and over again, and that's where you get a tumor. So when somebody finds a lump in their body, a tumor, they do a test called a biopsy, and the test is checking to see if that tumor is cancer or not cancer. And when they look at it under the microscope, they can tell some important information. What people are often hoping for is that the results will come back that the tumor is benign. Benign is sort of the better diagnosis. Benign means that it's not cancer and that the tumor is not going to spread to other parts of the body. A friend of mine who's an oncologist says that they tend to be encapsulated in a tissue. They're usually easier to remove surgically, and they don't invade the other tissues to the same extent that a cancerous tumor might. That's an oversimplification, and it's a lot more complicated than that, but that gives you kind of the general idea. So benign tumor is what people are usually hoping for. Does that mean it's not deadly? Absolutely not. A benign tumor in the brain can be very, very serious. A benign tumor on the ovary can be much less serious. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So again, I'm going to define cancer, and I'll probably say it about 3 times. Cancer is uncontrolled mitosis of abnormal cells that can spread throughout the body. When those cells are spreading throughout the body, that's called metastasizing. In the diagram, you see an individual who had melanoma, which is a kind of skin cancer. It passed through the bloodstream, and traveled to the liver and the brain. That's called metastasizing. In the X-ray, you see a bone tumor, so that's a kind of bone cancer. So if a biopsy is done and they find out that the tumor is not benign, but it is malignant, what does malignant mean? It simply means that the tumor tends to be more invasive. It invades the surrounding tissues. It's often more difficult to remove, although not always, and that is sort of what cancer is. Those of you that speak Spanish might know that the letter or the word M-A-L, mal, means bad. That might help you remember that malignant is sort of the worst of the two diagnoses. Okay, so the question here is, what makes cancer cells unique? That's a photo of a cancer cell in the middle that looks kind of like an octopus with way too many legs. And then there's tiny little white puffballs. Those are immune cells attacking that cancer cell. But you can tell that cell in the middle looks weird. It doesn't look like what you might expect. So what makes them unique? Again, for the 3rd time, uncontrolled mitosis. These guys can divide and divide and divide. They don't experience the Hayflick limit like other cells do, which can only divide up to 50 times. They lack contact inhibition, and that's a very difficult concept. Contact means to touch, and inhibition means to stop. So let me give you an example of normal contact inhibition. If you fall and skin your knee and you have an open wound on your leg, your skin cells begin to divide, and they divide and divide and divide until they start touching each other when they've closed the wound. Once they touch each other, in other words, they've made contact, they stop dividing. They inhibit more cell growth. So they have contact inhibition, and then you don't grow a big tumor on your knee where you skinned it. Cancer cells, on the other hand, will touch each other, and then they'll continue to divide, and they divide and divide and divide, and that's what forms a tumor. All right, another thing that makes cancer cells unique is that they might break away from other cells. At no time in your life will cells from your liver ever break away and travel to your lungs or your brain. unless those are liver cancer cells. The cancer cells have the ability to break away and travel through our lymphatic system or our bloodstream to other body parts. They look different. So letter D says they look different. Obviously, you can see in the photo they look different. So we can identify cancer cells under a microscope. And finally, letter E, what makes them unique? They lose normal function. Sometimes students ask me about leukemia. Leukemia is a cancer of the white blood cells where patients produce too many white blood cells. Well, students often know that white blood cells fight disease, and I often hear, shouldn't someone with so many white blood cells be virtually immune to all diseases? And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way because the immune cells aren't working properly. So leukemia patients are spending an enormous amount of their energy feeding these cells and helping these cells to reproduce, and they're not being protected from illness. Okay, I don't think this section is on your notes, so I'm not too worried about it, but I just wanted to show you that there are different kinds of tumors and different kinds of cancer. These are words you may have heard of. Carcinomas are cancers that grow in the skin and the tissues that line the body. Examples of carcinomas include lung and breast cancer. Sarcomas are cancers that grow in bone and muscle tissue, and lymphomas tend to be solid tumors that grow in the tissues that form the blood cells. Lymphomas may lead to leukemia, which we already said was the uncontrolled production of white blood cells. Okay, now we've said before that people can have mutations in their DNA, just random mutations, just accidents of nature. You can be born with mutations in your DNA, and anytime you have a mutation, it could give you an increased risk of cancer. But add to that the fact that there are carcinogens in our environment. Carcinogens are substances that increase the risk of cancer, usually by causing mutations in the DNA. They're called mutagens. Mutagens include all kinds of things. For example, radiation, like ultraviolet radiation or nuclear radiation. Ultraviolet radiation can lead to skin cancer. It's not strong enough to penetrate through the body. This is a photo of a girl using a black light. It's the same photo a second later, but they used a black light so that you could see the sun damage that she's had, and that's damage from ultraviolet radiation. And the more damage a person has, the more likely they are, in this case, to have something like skin cancer. Nuclear radiation can pass through the body, and so nuclear radiation can lead to cancers within the body, not just in the skin itself. Now, there are other examples of carcinogens, and let me get to those. Of course, most of you know that cigarettes include chemicals that can lead to cancer. So a carcinogen can be a chemical or an irritant that eventually causes the DNA to change. Within cigarette smoke, there are something like 60 different substances that are known to be carcinogens, and it can lead to all the cancers that are underlined there. So we know that smoking is something that definitely leads to cancer. Okay, finally, the last kind of carcinogen I want you to know are the viruses. We mentioned exposure to radiation is a carcinogen, chemicals in the environment can be carcinogens, and even, surprisingly, certain viruses, not all viruses, but certain viruses. The one that I think students are most interested is HPV. That's not HIV, that's a different thing. HIV is what leads to AIDS. That does not cause cancer. HPV is human papillomavirus. That's what girls are getting the Gardasil vaccine for, and it protects them from this sexually transmitted disease called human papillomavirus. Ironically, the human papillomavirus can lead to cervical cancer, and almost all cases of cervical cancer are due to exposure to the human papillomavirus. So that's why girls are being vaccinated against it, so that they don't develop that sexually transmitted disease, and then the case of cervical cancer. The example in the drawing here is the Epstein-Barr virus. The Epstein-Barr virus is the virus that causes mono. And in rare circumstances, it can cause the DNA to break. And so you see that chromosome 8 is a little bit short and chromosome 14 is a little bit long. That's a translocation, and that leads to a kind of cancer called Burkitt's lymphoma. All right, that's it for this set of notes. There's another set of cancer notes later.